All right, here we are, February 18th, 2026. Welcome back to the GFR. I'm John Michael Chambers. We are surviving and thriving this transition, which is what this show focuses on. And joining me today is, well, I've got some wrong notes in front of me. I know who's joining us today. It's Will Barney and Bill Armour, and we're going to have a great show today. Let's take a look at this announcement here. There it is. Michael Jaco and I, John and Jaco, join us as our second launch in the Patriot Q&A Hour. Will Barney was the premier launch, a very successful. Thank you, Will. And a lot of people had questions about Enoch Services, Will's venture and broad, big vision company that is being developed. And we're going to be talking about that in just a moment, about supporting humanitarian projects and efforts the world over. But Michael Jaco will be joining us February 26th, Thursday. Mark your calendars, 8 p.m. Eastern. Learn more about that by visiting jmcbroadcasting.com. All the information's there for you. Click on Premium Portal and you'll get to learn about that. All right. Well, let me begin here a bit of a narrative to set the tone before we bring Bill Armour and Will Barney on. All right. The final red pill. The debt narrative is inverted. For decades, citizens have been conditioned to believe they are burdened by debt, personally and nationally. Yet a closer examination of the financial system suggests a different reality. The public has not merely been taxed and indebted, but structurally positioned as collateral within a debt-based monetary framework. Think about that. So from republic to corporate structure. In 1871, the District of Columbia Organic Act altered the legal structure through which the United States operates. While the nation remained geographically intact, governance increasingly adopted corporate and commercial principles. Now, over time, this shift reframed citizenship from sovereign status toward administrative participation in a financial system governed by statutory law rather than constitutional primacy. That fast forwards us to 1933. The Gold Confiscation Act, FDR, formalized this transformation by removing gold from public hands and replacing it with fiat currency. Real assets were exchanged for trust-based instruments managed by centralized institutions. Since then, purchasing power has steadily eroded while public dependency upon credit has expanded. I'm sure you're familiar with that program. That takes us to the legal identity and financial representation. Modern administrative systems distinguish between the living individual and the legal persona used for contracts, taxation, and compliance. We covered this in great detail way back with retired Lieutenant Colonel Tom Lennox. The 90 minutes was on this very subject, birth certificate, etc. And by the way, we'll be bringing the colonel back. So this legal construct created at birth and referenced across financial and governmental systems enables large-scale economic coordination, but also obscures accountability. Most people interact with institutions exclusively through this framework, never questioning its implications. The result is a population that produces value while remaining disconnected from ownership of the system built upon that value. So where'd the wealth go? Where did our life's energy go? Wealth of this magnitude does not disappear, it consolidates. Central banking mechanisms, perpetual debt issuance, and inflationary policy have redirected public value into institutional balance sheets while maintaining the narrative of public liability. The greatest illusion has been convincing the productive class that it is perpetually indebted rather than foundational. Global financial reset conversion. This calls for debt jubilees and systemic resets stem from this imbalance. That's why. These discussions are not about handouts, but structural correction and restructuring the balance. A legitimate reset would require transparency, asset accountability, and a reassessment of value creation versus value capture. Emerging technologies, blockchain, AI auditing systems, and asset backed digital settlement challenge opacity. And Will Barney knows a thing or two about this. We're going to talk with Will in just a moment. They make extraction visible, traceable, and harder to conceal. Now, why does this matter? Matters a lot. This is not merely a financial debate. It is a question of sovereignty, identity, and consent. A system that relies on public trust while systematically devaluing public contribution cannot sustain legitimacy indefinitely. The issue is not whether a reset will occur, but who defines it and on whose terms. The narrative of debt is unraveling. What replaces it will define the next era. All right, now before we bring our esteemed guests on, the information provided by me and my guests is for educational purposes only and is not to be considered as specific investment, tax, nor legal advice. You are encouraged to do your own research and consult your financial, legal, and tax professionals. And a way to help you with this, check out at wealthcoachuniversity.com. Scroll down a bit, you see a little tab. I think it's blue. Advisor Scorecard. Check that out. It's a nice tool to help you through the process. All right, Will Barney brings over 19 years of experience in banking sector, where he has developed a strong specialization in structuring funding for commercial projects on a global scale. You're going to learn about that. You can also learn more about Will by visiting jmcbroadcasting.com. Click on the upper left-hand side where it says contributors. Scroll down a bit and you will find a biography, a photograph of Will, and a link to his website, enochgs.com, and you can learn more about Will there. All right, well, welcome back, Will.
Hi, John. Pleasure to be with you again.
Good to see you, sir. Any feedback or comments on my couple of 3-minute monologue there?
Yes, appreciate you actually opening with this topic, because it's important that we all understand that we've had our country subverted economically, politically, and medically, institutionalized education systems. Everything has been subverted, and it's been brought into the corporate domain. You know, there was a lot of changes that occurred very early on in the country, and all of this led up to what we now look at as the launch of the Federal Reserve taking over the money system. But there were a series of events that actually preceded that were important to understand. You know, big reports were coming to President Wilson in 1912 about there being all this great wealth that was being discovered in the Grand Canyon by prospectors. And in fact, he sent somebody out there to do a review and to do somewhat of a pseudo assay, if you will, as what's going on in the Grand Canyon. And so this gentleman went out there by train, did his work, and he came back. But on the way back, he was confronted by the bankers first before he had made it to the president. So they got the first look at the report, and the report was that there was vast wealth in the Grand Canyon and that there was a lot of gold reserves there in the ground. And they then went to President Wilson, convinced him that if this report were to become public, that it would crash the entire metals market and economically would destroy the country. Therefore, if you just turn over to them control of the metals and control of the money, they would make sure this didn't happen. So they convinced him to do a couple of things. One was to make the Grand Canyon a national park, kicking the prospectors out of there, and then to move forward with the Federal Reserve issue. So there's a lot of history that goes into where we ended up in this whole corporate process. It really kicked in. You know, we just had yesterday the launch of the new fire horse year with the zodiac calendar. A lot of people were following this, and that coincided with um, the the Ring of Fire eclipse. And what's interesting is those two colliding together only happens every 60 years or something. The last time it happened was in 1966, which was actually a time of great change and upheaval. The year of the horse has always been in the past a time of massive change and shift that occurs within that year. I think this is no less the same, as we've come out of the year of the snake, which represents the enemy from the beginning in the garden with Adam and Eve. And we move to the year of the fire horse. And so major changes underway. And this isn't just because of the astrological alignments, it's because of everything else that's been done to get us to this point. But the interesting thing about that is if you go back to 60 years, the last time this happened again, which was 1966, you had this big run-up of corporatization going on. You had governors of many states that were declaring they were having a problem in their state because they were paying the bills of their state using Federal Reserve notes. And many of them had constitutions of their state that said they can only use real money, which is tied to gold and silver. And this was a problem. They said, we're basically committing treason against our own state by using Federal Reserve notes. So there was a lot of discussion about this. Well, it's fine. Let's just corporatize all the states, and then they can send IOUs back and forth with the federal corporation that was established in 1871, as you so eloquently shown us. And that way we can pass IOUs back and forth and everything will be copacetic. So that process came about by the time we hit 1970, 71. All of the states had been corporatized. The post office was corporatized in 1968. So a great boom of corporatization was done during that time that led us to the decoupling of the gold standard in 71 by President Nixon. And since that time in 71, we've now seen the Federal Reserve note lose 96.5% of its value. So this was a major thing that's occurred, and now we're unwinding all of that. Now we're unwinding the corporate nonsense. We're unwinding all of that again, now in the year of the fire horse, where massive change is coming to undo everything that was done before. So this is absolutely a historic time to live and to be watching all of these things. You know, you showed a graphic from 1933 about gold and silver. That declaration asked that the people turn in their gold and silver and exchange them for Federal Reserve notes at the time. My grandmother had this direct experience and told me about it. And she was very angry. She actually didn't like FDR whatsoever. She said he stole the wealth of the country. And from that point forward, I always received a silver dollar every year for my birthday because she wanted me to have something that was real. So very, very interesting how these events have affected all of our lives and our families going forward. But now we're on the cusp of something that's very interesting. When we get to unwind all of this and we get to retake the sovereignty of our nation, and you're going to hear more about that word coming out of the administration as we go throughout this year, is that we are restoring sovereignty. We're restoring sovereignty in trade agreements. We're restoring sovereignty in how we interact with businesses and how the country positions itself in relation to other countries. And you're going to hear a lot of people talking about that. And sovereignty is really simple. It's really about taking full personal responsibility for everything in your life. If you're a sovereign being, you are 100% responsible. You're responsible for everything. And you don't blame others, and you're not dependent on others. Well, we become a dependent nation. So we have a bit of a process now as we unwind this and get back to becoming a manufacturing powerhouse, as we once were, where we can regain that position of sovereignty by being completely independent and self-sufficient within ourselves. And it's all coming back. We've got 18 trillion of investment pouring into the country right now to help us do that. And that has created a very interesting phenomenon because the phenomenon of massive money coming in has typically been from money printing in the past. When the Federal Reserve prints a whole bunch of money and they inject it in the economy, you typically have massive inflation that's affecting everybody. Okay. So as this inflation escalates, the value of the dollar is crashing. But what's happened in this case is this money isn't coming from printing. It's coming from outside the country, from other nations investing,
Mhm.
bringing dollars back home. And so it's allowing this massive escalation in the rebuilding of the infrastructure without the cost of inflation. And so now we're seeing record low inflation, but at the same time, we're getting these benefits that's been going on. It is not easy doing a financial transition. It is usually bumpy. It is usually a bit rough as you come in for that landing. But this presidency, if you look at all the members of his cabinet, are doing things to really supercharge that economic activity so that we can, as easily as possible, land more softly on the other side of the transition because of the economic engine that's already in force.
So well said. I'll pedal back a moment. Thanks for walking us through some of the things not so widely known about what happened prior to 1913 and some of the aspects of that that you covered. Fascinating. And also, God bless your mother for those silver coins, taking care of young Will growing up, learning the value of real money. Interesting stuff. Anyway, so Will, you've we did to our audience. Will Barney was our premier guest on our first launch Patriot Q&A hour last month, where Will and I are on the screen for the hour and Will to answer your questions. And thank you all for attending. It was well attended. A lot of great questions came across, and a lot of them, because we can't answer all of them in an hour, our team answers them via email for those unanswered questions. And there was a lot, Will, of questions that weren't answered because we didn't have the time to explore it. Let's spend a few minutes here going over that. People were fascinated by your big vision, the team that, presumably that you're also working with for Enoch globalservices.com. You see it on the screen. Talk with us about this. This is, as I understand it in layman's terms, but you're going to walk us through this. It's a technological systems to assist all the humanitarian projects that'll be sprouting up all over the world. And there's a lot of interest in that, which is very encouraging that the interest is there today. So why don't you walk us through your brainchild here? And we've got a snapshot of the website. Folks, you can go visit the site, enochgs.com. Go, take it away, Will. Tell us what you're working on.
Well, thanks, John. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the work that we are engaged in. We've been this isn't something that just magically happened this year or last year. This is a process that's been nearly 2 decades in the making. So what we have been about is trying to create a platform that can make a difference in terms of being able to launch projects successfully and have them properly managed. When it comes to humanitarian funds, humanitarian projects, a lot of people think that money's just going to be handed out and people just going to do whatever they want with a project. But there's actually accountability that comes with this. And so we're trying to build a software and hardware package, if you will, that puts together all of the elements to allow you to go from an idea to a business plan to getting launched and have a successful conclusion to your project. And along the way, have a reporting system built into that that provides that reporting back to the regulatory authority who's doing the oversight. We do expect in this case that that's probably going to be largely the effort of the Treasury, but we're trying to build that to meet whatever compliance needs that they have. So the whole key here is the biggest problem that we saw as we were looking at ways to manage projects is we live in a world where the internet is prolific and it's all over the world and everybody's got access to it, but we couldn't find a place of safety. Many of these internet systems throughout each country go through various forms of surveillance equipment. Some of these are governmental in nature. Some of them may not be. Some might even be privately owned. But the reality is there's a lot of information that's transacting continually in this way. So we began looking for solutions that could provide safety and security, because the last thing we want is to have some of these great projects that are going forward to be stuck in a quagmire of either cybercrime and cyber intrusion, or to have information and technology stolen that could be used perhaps against them later. So we were looking for safety and security was the first thing that we were looking for. And along that way, we did find some people that had the expertise to help us with this. Some of these have been involved in the military, former military, and they're working on their own projects, but they've agreed to help us with some of ours. So we're building a private data center system. So it's like a private cloud designed to hold the information for each of these companies that launch, and to do this in a way that is safe and secure. The systems are tier 6, what we know as data center being tier 6. So this is very high level. There's very few tier 6 data centers even in the United States. And because it's multiple levels of redundancy. And we can thank the team that we have for being so efficient with their work and helping us with this. But the idea is to bring safety and security onto the humanitarian platform, but to provide this in a way that keeps accountability and reporting done accordingly. The last thing we want is to have humanitarians that are embarking on these missions with these projects to be in a situation where maybe they haven't done their reporting properly, and they haven't met some compliance standards, and then they miss their next draw schedule. And we don't want that to happen. We want everybody to get their draw schedules on time, and want the projects to go forward on time. So we're trying to build this to be very robust. The idea is to build it of significant strength that we can handle thousands of new project starts a year. Each one of these are essentially a business, because that's really how projects are done. It's done as businesses. Some will be nonprofit, some will be for-profit. Probably the majority will be for-profit, because we are encouraging everyone to look at sustainability. If you create a job with your great project, blessing the world, we want you to keep that job for the next 30 years. We don't want you going 5 years later to those employees and saying, well, I couldn't raise enough to cover your payroll this year. We don't want to see that happen. We want to see everybody move forward in a magnificent way. So we're building this system as a foundation because we had many other projects to do, okay? So we needed a way to manage it. So now this is becoming the premier thing we're doing, because we're having other humanitarians that are approaching us saying, we need a system like that. We didn't think through our projects to realize that we needed to plan for the management side. And so now we're looking at ways that we might be able to open that up and make it perhaps through licensing or other things to make that available to more people, so that the systems can be robust. We're beginning in the U.S. That's ultimately where it starts, just because that's home office for us. Okay. Mm-hmm. However, we do intend to take this to as many countries around the world as we are able to, as each of them are open to having the technology and the expertise come into their country. When we do move to other countries, which will probably come once we feel sufficiently secure about the software development process, we do expect to be moving fairly rapidly. When we go to another country, it doesn't matter whether it's Europe or Africa or what continent it might be. If we go into Zimbabwe, for instance, just as an example, to set up there, and they invite us to come in, and we're going to set up a trust there. We're going to set up the entire same system that we have here, and we're going to be able to launch some projects there. And we ask two things of projects that are coming through our system. We want you to share your technology and your product or your service with the world. It doesn't mean it's free. You can charge appropriately for it so that you can stay in business and thrive. But we want you to just make it available. Don't cling stuff to yourself and hoard it away. Secondarily, we ask that you give back in some form or fashion, and that give back really comes in the way of a pay it forward. We'd like you to contribute back to the foundation so that the project coming behind you has some funds to get them started too. And that give back is only 10%, and the funding is 100%. So If you're a project owner and you've got everything laid out, you've spent 20 years preparing yourself, you get fully funded and you keep 90% of the project. It's an absolutely amazing deal. We just ask that you give 10% forward to help the next guy. And this over time creates an economic engine. And the hope is that once we get past our initial capital that we've got available for the project, that we then have an economic engine to continue that work for the next 20, 30, 50 years, where projects never stop. They continue to go forward and continue to bless the world in a beneficial manner. Hope that helps a little bit.
What an extraordinary, thank you, Will. An extraordinary vision and undertaking, as you stated, in the works for 2 decades with a power team alongside you and behind you, and that's fantastic. And so we're going to be following, as you frequent the shows over the course of this year, the developmental changes that are taking place. So thank you for going into further detail, especially for all those that are following you and following us together. I always like to deliver, and you've certainly delivered. So thank you very much, Will. I want to move into some of the drive-by news bites of the week, if you will.
Sure.
According to Caroline Leavitt, the White House expects 2026 to be one of the largest tax refund seasons, citing statements by President Trump on economic growth and future gains, where Trump said, "I am proud to announce a huge $320 billion tax refund, effective immediately, made possible by our incredible tariffs, America first." So the United States has never issued a tax refund, as I understand it, of this magnitude. This will have obviously a major impact on financial markets with all that capital coming in. Pardon me, folks. I'm going to pull up. I don't have the big Tucker Carlson Power Studio support system behind me, so I'm going to go over here to this screen. I pulled this up just at the last minute before we went live, which is why it hasn't been built into my show script. But I want to read this to you from the president. He just published this, yesterday. Tax refunds, of course, it's President Trump style. He's having fun. Enjoy the show. He said tax refunds this year, because of the great, big, beautiful bill, are substantially greater than ever before. In some cases, estimates are that over 20% will be returned to the taxpayer. So when you get your tax refund, the president says, think about what a wonderful president you have. No tax on tips, no tax on Social Security for our great seniors. Thank you, President Trump. I'm in that bracket. I arrived. No tax on overtime, interest deductions on car loans, and much more, the president says, concluding, don't spend all of this money in one place. President Donald J. Trump. So some fun with that, but also some incredible news, as Caroline Leavitt, our press secretary, has informed us, and these quotes I just read from the president. Any feedback on that? And also the impact that this will have as that money comes into the hands of the American people, the income on the economy.
Again, this is designed to juice the economy and to help the people in a meaningful way. You don't go from an enslaved system where everybody is controlled and taxed into the ground and just suddenly arrive at some Nasara moment in the snap of the fingers. There's actually steps and stages of which you go through to make this happen without it being so, shall we say, explosive that it causes a rift between the public and you have people actually wanting to shoot at each other. So we're wanting to avoid all that. Mm-hmm. And so this is part of that. So what we're seeing here is the first major step, which is ease the tax burden, which came with a big, beautiful bill. Let's get these rebates back to people. So the first step is ease the tax burden. And then it's going to lead to other steps, which eventually there's going to be no tax burden in terms of income tax. There will be taxation because governments do have to operate in some form or another, but it's going to be a level playing field where everybody pays the same amount, like sales tax. Everybody pays the same amount of sales tax. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor or who you are, right? So it's going to be something that's, if you look at it at Constitution, it says that taxes can only be levied across the country if it's done by apportionment. Apportionment means everybody pays the same. Mm-hmm. And that's what sales tax is. It's everybody pays the same. Income tax has been not that at all, as we know. No. So we're watching steps and stages where he's giving back to the people. He's given a portion, and we expect there to be even more giving to come, by the way. And the cool thing is as the economy is roaring back to life, and we have all this tariff revenue pouring in, that's going to lead the way for people to mentally grasp the idea of getting to where we don't need income tax, because it's hard for people to take this mental leap, right? And jump all the way. Wait a minute, I've had this all my life. How could this possibly happen now? So you have to take them in steps and stages. The first step is big refunds. There's actually we're going to have probably the biggest refund year ever in taxes for most of you that are alive right now, and that's just the start. So there's more coming in steps and stages from there as we move forward. And I love this president. He loves to throw things out, and there's one thing about him that is consistent, and that is he loves to make a splash. And he likes to kind of rattle the cages just a little bit. It's kind of the fun that he has with himself and reporters about this information. So it's really fascinating to me, and this is probably more so for those that didn't vote for him, maybe that Democrats that don't really get behind the president. They're getting relief too. Everybody gets relief. You know, he's not showing favoritism to anybody. Everybody gets the same relief, and they're going to see that things are beneficial. The amazing thing is the party that didn't vote for him, they have the highest taxation rates in all of their collective states and cities of any of the other places. So it's very fascinating. I'm not saying that the Democrats are the only one that tax high, because Republicans like to do it too. We've had people in both parties participate in this nonsense. And so we're seeing it come to an end. I love that the president's putting the notice out there. Relief is coming. It's going to get better. I actually think that the next 90 days are going to be some of the most consequential in our history as we go through. We're about to enter what I affectionately will call, in Q refer to this, March Madness. Okay. There's going to be some things that take place within March that are leading us to a place where we can start to look at a replacement currency. And I do think if we have metals that start to escalate, and we've already seen huge gyrations. You saw silver go all the way to $112. You know, now it's back down to in the 70s, and it's up and down. It's up and down. These kind of gyrations are going to create additional a bit of pain. Okay, let me be honest here. It doesn't matter if you vote red or blue. None of that matters. What's going to matter is what unites everybody is your bank account. It's your pocketbook. And so when people begin to see the fallacy that is fiat currency, and this is going to be played out over the next couple of months, everyone's going to get to a place where they're going to want to, and they're going to demand, we need asset-backed currency. We need stability. So these gyrations, if you're awake, you probably already knew this was going to come. I said it was going to be bumpy, making a transition. But if you're asleep, it's even bumpier for you. You're probably in a bit of more of a panic. But because the country is running so well, because we have so much of this economic energy going forward, and we have low inflation, it's providing the right environment where we can have as minimal casualties as possible in a switchover of systems. And so I think the second half of this year is going to be phenomenal as we get into that. And there's talk that the president's going to be leading us in 49 days of prayer as we move into May, leading up to the 4th of July. And this is important because he wants us to look at ourselves as a country blessed by God and with God's blessings. And I think that's actually a wonderful thing as we look forward. We've had enough of the godless and the results of that, and it's been pretty horrific. And now everybody would really love to be in favor with our Creator and be able to receive His blessings again. And I think we're going to see that in great abundance, particularly the second half of the year.
So well said. You've connected a lot of very, very important big pieces of this transition for humanity. And I agree with you. So folks, watch the next several, maybe 2 months or whatever Will just indicated. I agree with you. In that time space, we'll have the issues that we'll be dealing with that you raised. And you're right. Then the light shines, and we are bringing our nation and ourselves individually back to God. And you mentioned some of the evils that have taken place. We're not going to get into the Epstein list on this broadcast, but folks watching, you'll want to check out my Global Defense War panel coming up next week, and my special report with Sheila Holm and Eyes on Gitmo with Juan O'Savin, Brigadier General Blaine Holt, and others. But thank you, Will. It's very well said. Let's shift gears. The show moving along here. Let's talk about crypto. Donald Trump Jr., I think it's well, where am I? I'm a day ahead, 12 hours ahead of you guys. Did he just hold, or is he holding a World Liberty Forum hosted at Mar-a-Lago? Do you know anything about this on the subject of crypto? He's brought the crypto community together, as
Yeah,
I
he's trying to
understand
bring
anyway.
people together to have a discussion to coincide with the conversation around the Digital Asset Market Clarity Act, which is in the Senate and is being debated. And there's a lot of back and forth that's been going on. There's been, shall we say, crypto exchanges that have engaged in the conversation. Some of them don't like what's in the Market Clarity Act. I think it's personally about the fact that they don't want to be held to a standard of transparency because they've had one of opaqueness somewhat in the past. And that is that if you open an account on their exchange, and I'm not going to name names, but on the exchange, they get to hold your keys so they can do things with those tokens without your knowledge. They could be trading those overnight, for instance, and there's kind of this opaqueness. You think you have it in your wallet, you're not sure if it's there. And that comes to an end with the passage of this bill. It also provides, because of that, where they're not able to just simply use your assets whenever they want in the background, it's going to reduce their profit margins. So there's some pushback coming from the crypto community because they've had a few years here of running around in the Wild West. But what we really want is, and it's right in the name, clarity. We want transparency, right? Transparency keeps everyone honest. And I love the blockchain system because it's got the ability to provide, from transparency and clarity, this idea that we don't need to trust the person on the other end of our smart contract, because the smart contract validates whether they have the money to pay us or not. We don't have to worry about that. We don't have to trust, it's all right, I'll get you the money by Friday, right? We don't need any of that anymore, because the system becomes verification on both sides of the party. It's trustless. You don't really need the trust anymore because of the transparency is so open. This is very interesting. We've never had such an open, transparent system of this type ever. It's actually historical, okay, with what's going to take place here. And so this is really fascinating as we look at the crypto community. And if you notice, there's been a lot of downward pressure on a lot of tokens. Bitcoin was pushed down to 66,000. 6 months ago, it was 118. Okay. So that's a pretty massive push down. Same thing with XRP.
No
it was once over $3. Now what, to $1.42? So you have this going on. And part of this is the play of fiat. Everyone needs to understand we're living through a dramatization designed to help you understand that fiat is not backed by anything. Its value could be whatever. What is the value? You don't know. It's whatever you might perceive it to be. And so we're going through this process together, both the awake and the unawake, so that we might better understand that we need to have a store of value. We need to have assets that are actually backed by something, and that money needs to be based upon those assets so that we understand our money has value. We don't want to lose 96.5% of our money's value over 50 years. Nobody wants that. Does that make sense? It doesn't make sense. So we need to figure out how to retake that, and that's going to come through assets. The other thing is very different about where we're going, John, and I think this is important for everyone to grasp and understand, and that is that we've been living in a debt-based system. In a debt system, you cannot create more money without creating more debt. There's no way out of it. The debt levels go up and up and up, and that just continues on until eventually, where are you? You're going to bankrupt the system and the whole thing's going to collapse, or you're going to reset it. Usually the reset was done somewhere between 50 years on the outside. We're way over 50 years now, and you can see it's hanging on by a thread, right? It makes sense. We've had banks hit the reverse repo window again this week, of borrowing billions again. There's issues going on, and we can see that it's not going to hang on much longer. So it is important that we understand, if we don't have this legislation, that's this Digital Asset Market Clarity Act, it's going to be very hard to make a transition to a new financial system, because we need this to give us law, structure, and regulation to protect our new system. And I do think we will see that. I don't think Trump said he wanted it by the end of February. I don't think it's a February. It may not be a March. It might be an April delivery from some of the sources that I'm hearing. Okay, by the time we get there, maybe it's right after Easter or something. Okay, but the idea is, once we get that, now we have law and order. We have real regulation. We have something that we can move to that's asset-backed, not debt-based. We're going to rebuild the world on assets, not debt. We're going to build it on real stuff, and that changes everything for our kids, our grandkids, and all the future that comes, the prosperity that comes behind us for the rest of our family. So we live in this moment, will be looked back on as what we're experiencing, and it's being delivered here in 26. We set the table in 25. The foundation is laid, and now we're gonna reap an amazing feast as we go throughout this year. But I do think it's the second half of the year, and I think it's going to be so good, we will probably begin to forget the pain we've suffered getting here. Hope that helps a little bit.
Oh, that helps a lot a bit. A trustless system, boy, that sounds like music to my ears. And July 4th, of course, will be marked, in my opinion, as the official or unofficial official trigger date of the scales being tipped and the new world being experienced more gradiently and more increasingly than it is at this moment. Clarity Act, real quick on that as well. Comes from the Ripple CEO. He says Clarity Act will ensure next-gen financial infrastructure is anchored in American values. You've certainly gone far beyond that. But he says the biggest cycle of your life is about to occur. Ripple CEO believes there's an 80% chance the Clarity Act will pass by the end of April. So you're in pretty good company there with your target projection dates. Clarity Act also is the key to open the floodgates. The crypto coins cited by the Ripple guy is that will lead the cycle. Just a quick feedback from you on that, and we're going to segue into something else. He indicates the crypto coins that will lead this cycle that you have been discussing: XRP, XLM, SHX, XDC, ALGO, HBAR, QNT, ZBCN, and I don't profess to know what all those coins are. I know the first few because I own one of them. But what's your take on that statement?
Well, you're talking about a list of coins that are compliant. So we're trying to place compliance within this new system. Now we're trying to bring what was a Wild West and put it into guardrails so that there's protections for the public. What's going to be interesting is once that's fully enforced, and I do think we'll get there within April. The amazing thing about that is those tokens that are not compliant with those standards going forward are going to have a difficult future. Okay. But the ones that Brad's talking about these are compliant coins. These are coins that have already long ago have put themselves in a place to be compliant with rule, law, and regulation. And this is going to be an important thing to think about. I tend to lean a little bit conservative on some of my risk levels. But at this point, I'm leaning towards, if it's not compliant with ISO standards, it's probably not going to be something in my portfolio. just because I don't know if I want to. It doesn't mean there isn't opportunities, and this isn't financial advice
Right.
for anybody, but we want to go with what we think are the future rails of
Yes.
regulation and compliance, and we want to be in something that's meeting all those obligations, so we have no issues down the road in the future. So maybe we're a little conservative in that fact, but I think that what Brad is saying is could not be understated. This change is dramatic because it's going to allow us to interact. John, I can send you money. You can send me stuff. We can do a smart contract with each other, and we can close that in less than a minute.
Yeah.
This has never been done in banking before, not
Correct.
in any of our lifetimes. And remember when it used to take 48 hours, 72 hours to finally get closings done, finally have settlement, if you will. It was painful. So this is actually eliminating the middleman. We don't need the bank.
Hmm.
If I can send from my digital wallet and it go to your digital wallet, I'm not going to a bank. I'm just going directly to you. This is peer to peer
Sure.
transparency. That is incredible. And watch what happens when you see the adoption of this from the stock market and other indices like this, where they start bringing everything onto chain and finding a way to do this. Because when you can settle in seconds, then watch what happens to trading world. It's really going to move at incredible speed.
Oh
Trump
yeah.
said, hey, by the end of his presidency, maybe the stock market, the Dow could hit 100,000, right? He was talking about the 50,000 it reached recently. When you get to that
Hmm.
place where you have instant settlement and you can move at that speed, things can move at a whole nother trajectory. And so that's going to make for a very interesting future.
Absolutely. Real quick, Juan O'Savin, no stranger to the new news networks and platforms like ours, um, broadcasting here. He said he believes the president's legacy will be mainly these two. Of course, I think many things, but at the top, two things. One, the restoration of sound money. And I'm sure he would elaborate in terms of the system that allows sound money. And second, of course, is election free and fair elections restored. And I would agree. And both of these issues are front and center right now. And by the way, to our audience, we'll be jumping into those details on the election issues, election integrity, some of the fears and concerns that a lot of people within our movement have. I don't, and you'll understand why I don't. I think once you listen to uh, the questions I'm going to present to those panels. But thank you so much, Will. I want to see if these are rumors, if you've heard about this or not. Ripple could receive approval to become a U.S. national trust bank as early as this year. A move like this would mark a major step towards deeper institutional integration, let's say for XRP. Is that a rumor or is that not the right word? Bank? Any
It's
quick
going
comment
in
on
that
that before?
direction. I haven't seen anything that would
Mhm.
indicate it wouldn't happen eventually. So
Okay.
so far they've made application. It's in a process. I actually think it's
Hmm.
going to be approved because I don't think there's any
Yeah, nice.
company out there that is working more diligently with regulation and regulators to make sure that they're always compliant within the rails of what law and order should be than Ripple. There's no company that has been more diligent in trying to stay within regulatory rails than Ripple, and I think because of that, I think they're going to have an incredible future. I do think they will get approval, and that will be tremendous because when you can start doing loans, now they just issued a new. Recently, most people knew this, but they just issued a new upgrade to the XRPL, the XRP ledger, with some new functionality. And one of those functionalities is loans, the ability to do loans directly
Hmm.
on the XRPL. So this is
Wow.
going to be very interesting as we move forward, and having a banking license will allow them to engage in a very interesting way. So Brad Garlinghouse and his company they're on fire. They've you look at what they've done in the last 2 years with the acquisition of Hidden Road, one of the largest broker dealers, and now I think they've adjusted the names, but they took that on. They took on G Treasury. G Treasury, one of the most incredible tools in digital finance, and a way to bring all of your stuff together, whether not just digital wallets, but also bank accounts and everything, and under one roof, and be able to see and analyze everything. And G Treasury is an incredible tool. That's now been named Ripple Treasury for most people, and companies are going to be using these tools, and they're coming at prices that are very affordable. In fact, it's at a fraction of probably what you would have spent in the traditional banking system. It removes the opaqueness. We get transparency. The hard thing with banking in the past has always been, if you had 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, if you're on Swift, you might have a 7-day settlement if you're going around the world, okay? Trying to
Mhm.
settle funds. But every day it sits in the system is another day somebody's grabbing it. Somebody's messing
Of
with that.
course.
Nothing sits still ever, right?
Yep.
So when you
Yep.
create this opaqueness, you create an environment where everybody's trying to get some advantage and work off of other people's money continually. This
Mhm.
transparency does away with that, and where people are not allowed to do that because you hold the keys, and only you can move that. And this is giving power back to the people in a way that I've never seen anything like this, to bring back fiscal power and responsibility back to the people, not to outside vendors or banks or some other institution, but to really empower people to take control of their financial future in a meaningful way. Thank you, Ripple. I appreciate all the stuff that you're doing. You're giving tools to all of us that are just the real people trying to work and exist in this world. You're giving us tools to have an incredible future. Thank you for that.
You're such a wealth of knowledge in this and probably many other spaces as well. I'd like to invite you down the line that maybe later this year to Conversations of Consequence. Those that follow my work understand what that platform is about, where we feature what I consider to be people that have an important voice during these times, and we get to learn a little bit about you and your journey, and to dive into some of the issues. So I'll extend that invitation a little bit later this year. Let's bring on Bill Armour. You know, you and I haven't spent much time in this discussion today talking about what's going on with the central banks, with the gold and silver markets. And another man with a wealth of knowledge in the precious metals arena is, of course, Bill Armour. Bill has built a unique career combining vocational ministry and expertise in precious metals, equipping him to bridge faith based perspectives with practical wisdom in stewardship and in business. Bill's from originally Tucson, Arizona, spent 8 years serving in the U.S. Army Reserves. Uh, thank you for that service. Thereafter, he went on to attend Azusa Pacific University, a Christian school in Southern California with a focus in Christian ministry and biblical studies. You've got 3 men of strong faith here on the screen with you. Please welcome Bill Armour.
Great to be here.
Good to see you, Bill. Let's jump into. We spent a lot of time on the new systems, the old systems. We've learned a lot of things from Will from 1912 forward, and glimpses into what the immediate and mid and long term future looks like. Very powerful. Let's jump into some aspects of gold and silver. We'll begin a little slowly and we'll ramp it up. Seems that trading volume, at least in the last week, let's say, has slowed down, possibly we're talking about precious metals, partially in part due to maybe the Chinese New Year. You know, they shut down big time. I lived in communist China for a year and a half. Believe me, I think it's like a week, 10 days, it's just nothing but parties and fireworks. I mean, the whole country, just parties. But basically, could it be the lower volume of trading because of the Chinese New Year, the president's weekend we just came from? How long will gold and silver remain at these recent lower levels? As Will indicated, we're at about $76 roughly, give or take, in silver right now. Seems to be hovering in that range. How long do you think gold and silver will remain at these recent lower levels before, say lower levels, they're still nice high levels in context, and probably both up year to date. But having said that, I think you and our audience knows what I'm talking about. Um, how long will we remain in this level before we continue the trajectory, not so volatile, but moving us up to new levels and trading in new and higher levels? How long do you think we'll stay in this lower range?
Yeah, Yeah, great question. I'll start by just reiterating what you just said there, which is that, these lower levels are still, 300% higher than they were, 12, 18 months ago. So, it's a,
Yes.
it's a quite a mindset shift, but it also presents a tremendous opportunity for people who, when it moved, a lot of people were busy with life, and all of a sudden they looked up and silver was, $50, and then suddenly it was 100 and, $10. And so luckily it's come down and it's a little more approachable for people. But you're right, trading volume's down
Hmm.
a little bit, which is some of the reasons you mentioned. Obviously, the long weekend, you've got Lunar New Year's, etc. Other things. But one thing I do want to point out that maybe people aren't talking about is the outflows of metals, physical metals here that we're still seeing. So even if trading volume necessarily is down, those outflows are not down. We're seeing right now daily outflows of 3 to 5% out of Comex, meaning that if you were to extrapolate that
Mm.
out, looking at maybe 30 days before Comex literally doesn't have metals that they could give anyone. So when you think about that, the problem that we've been facing for so long is that there is eventually a point where you cannot, oh, that's mine, this has all been accounted for. There is not physical silver that people are willing to part with, particularly not at a price point like $77, $78. So we're coming very quickly to that point where the people have decided, you know what, I mean, myself included, let's say, I have no interest in selling, my silver at $77, $78. Now, granted, the physical, price to actually acquire it is higher right now. Premiums are rising even with the prices dropping down because counterintuitively, people want the silver more now that it's cheaper. And so it's becoming harder and harder to acquire. So there's a little that's a little counterintuitive, but the number you see on the screen, on that when you just Google silver price or whatnot, not necessarily what you're seeing on the streets.
Yeah.
In fact, Shanghai, for instance, 10, 15, $20 higher than those numbers. So you might ask yourself, well, okay, there's got to be an arbitrage. Why aren't people just taking all the silver and selling it to China? And they are, is the answer to that. And China's just fine with that. They are sucking up like a vacuum all the metals they can. They have no issues. They're happy to take it. And there are, people, in this country that are naive enough to sell them those metals. So,
Yeah.
China's locked on their silver supply. They're not letting any of that out. But on the flip side, of course,
Yep.
we've got naive people, I would say, that are letting their silver go, and institutions letting their silver go. So again, 3 to 5% is what we're seeing in terms of outflows day over day. So the answer to your question then is it goes as long as until people aren't willing to part with their metals at these prices. So I would say as we get closer and closer, we squeeze down that number. Maybe it's 2 weeks to a month, month and a half. So I would say anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks, we see maybe this consolidation at the $75 range before we start seeing it really ramp up again. And then it probably gets pretty volatile again. We start seeing these 5+%
Hmm.
up days in metals, which I want to remind people you don't go into metals thinking you're going to hold it for a week or a day or this or that. This is generally a long term hold. And the people that obviously have done that have done
Hmm.
very, very well for themselves. Because if you see silver
Hmm.
drop $3 or $4 or $5 in a given day, shouldn't even be something you think about. Completely irrelevant. Because we're talking about moves here
Correct.
going to exceed what we've already seen initially here in the move from 20, $30 to $70. So the intraday stuff really shouldn't concern people. It's what they want to focus on
Hmm.
is what you're purchasing good, today at this price. Is it going to be better in a month, 2 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years? And luckily for anyone that's going to hold, I mean, if you're just holding it for a week, I mean, that's you could flip a coin. It could be up, down, left, or sideways. But if we're talking 6 months from now, then eventually the chickens come home to roost. And so I would just tell people that you've maybe got 4 to 6 weeks before we start seeing the real movement back up. And I know a lot of people might point to the contracts coming due in March, the COMEX contracts coming due in March, so that could speed that up considerably. That's a whole other topic we could get into. But assuming none of that
Hmm.
amplifies or accelerates this, I would say we're looking at sometime in March.
Well, thank you. Great information. And that being said, obviously, the message is clear. It's a long-term position for fundamental reasons, plus all the transitional things that Will has addressed. Uh, this is a time to buy in this 4 to 6 week period because you're not going to see $75 moving
Right.
forward. Will, this is the Will and Bill hour. I'm sort of the ping pong watch back and forth here. Will, do you care to comment? on the question, the time frame and some of the issues that Bill Armour just raised.
I'm expecting silver to lead March Madness. As we get into a week from now, as people start putting in their orders for delivery come the 1st of March for these future contracts, there's already been people stepping forward indicating, are they going to stand for delivery? Or are they going to roll? Some are going to roll, some are going to stand for delivery. But I was looking at the COMEX levels today and the current inventory, and the availability right now is actually under the pending contracts coming due. If you have a lot of those
Mm,
stand for delivery, it could wipe out COMEX in the first week. Now, I'm not saying that's how
wow.
it's going to go. I'm just saying that you can't ignore, we can't ignore information like this because it's going to have an effect. And so I do think that silver's massively undervalued. It does need to be higher to be economically feasible to get it out of the ground and mine it on a regular basis. If we're going to have it for industrial uses, technology, whether it be solar panels, batteries, electric cars, or chips and AI and all the other stuff, we need to have a supply of it. Right now, the majority of silver is being consumed in these industrial projects. It's at least 60% is going into that. And the problem with that is it's not just going to somebody's vault. It's not going to a silver stacker who's just sitting on it. It's actually being consumed. That's not recoverable. You don't go melt down solar panels to grab silver. At least not at this price, you don't. Okay? So it's a consumption that's going on, and that is making it even tighter than ever before. We had 5 years of running into the reserves because the consumption outstripped the actual global supply that was going on a regular basis. And you don't do that for
Right.
5 years and then expect to have what we see coming in terms of March contracts coming due. And I think there's going to be a great number of those in a desperate move to get physical silver that are going to stand for delivery. So I think early March, we could see some movement there. Obviously, when that happens, the price is going to move because there's going to become this decoupling. Paper is going to become irrelevant, and everybody's only going to be
Yes.
paying attention to what can I physically get silver for, whatever the price is. And they're going to be grabbing it. So I think you'll see Shanghai will be moving to 120 very fast. And you'll see the US following right behind. In fact, the COMEX price is a bit, it's I kind of laugh at it a little bit, because I had people tell me like, well, I looked it up and it was $77. This was this morning. Somebody asked me about it. It's $77. And I said, I dare you to find physical silver at 77 bucks. Can you find it?
Mhm.
And he said, yeah, I'll find it. And he comes back a little while later. He says, well, I can find a paper contract, but I can't find physical. It's so slow. Yeah, exactly. It's going to come to, we're going to
Yep.
move right past the fake to the real physical market. That's going to be where we're going to land. And that's what's going to carry the day going forward. And I think it's an upward trajectory just because of tight inventories of silver.
Beware the Ides of March. I'd like to, you're focusing on paper, perfect segue. I'd like to go back to Bill on that and then have a discussion. Seems to me, with everything that's been stated, all that's going on behind the scenes with the central bank implosion, we're rapidly moving at two levels. I want to approach this from paper to tangibles globally, as you've just alluded to. Bill, would you concur that that's taking place? We're going to talk about paper versus tangible on, let's say, the retail investor, folks like ourselves that go and acquire these things. We'll get into ETFs and mutual funds and all that in a minute. But from an institutional and a governmental and a global thing, let's talk a little. Let's strip this down a little bit. Are we moving from paper to tangibles globally? What are the dangers in there? And would you concur to that statement?
Yeah, absolutely. And you can literally measure that. And, and that's when we talk about the outflows here away from, paper assets here and into physical assets. We're seeing this at numbers we've never seen before. I mean, even internationally here, the movement of countries swapping their currency for dollar, excuse me, their currency for metals, for gold. Like China, for instance, is on, I think it's 18 consecutive months of record buys in terms of gold. So we're seeing
Oh,
across the board, not just in the United States, but across the world, that countries are swapping for physical metals. And so, and I like that word decoupling, because we're seeing this decoupling from the
mhm.
historic sort of paper understanding of wealth. And countries are ahead of this. It's not like this is something that they don't know or aren't understanding. That's why you're seeing this massive buying across the board, is because there is beginning to be a global understanding. This is not just the United States, a global understanding that the one who owns the metal will be protected, or at least insulated from a lot of the fallout here of this change of the guard here, at least economically. When we talk about the previous, obviously uh, the Fed note, and then moving forward here into an asset-backed currency. So the way you insulate from that is to own tangibles. You don't want to own the thing here that may or may not be worth its value here when that transition occurs. That's complete speculation on what exactly that will be worth. The one promise that you get is in the actual tangible asset here. So paper is sort of a promise, an IOU. Physical is a product, and so that's the difference here that we're going to see, that we're already seeing, not just in the United States, but in the entire world. Physical is leaving here everywhere you can get. I mean, Eastern countries have already figured this out, like China. That's why they're taking so many metals in. That's why you're seeing these persistent premiums. But you still have, again, I say that change of the guard here. You still have banking cartel members that are still trying to prop this system up for the last couple days, months, weeks before this does happen. So if they want to be
Yep,
naive and they want to try and
yep.
perpetuate
Good
this
point.
myth for another, month, 2 months, 6 months, a year, whatever it might be, right, maybe 4 months, let's say, that's fine. And people should not be fooled or misunderstand what is happening. These are last ditch attempts to continue a cycle, that sort of the debt slavery cycle that we've been indebted to for so long. So if you just look past that, look at what other countries are doing, looking at what Trump is doing, looking at all of these people, smart people are doing, which is getting to tangibles, then you can be ahead of the curve too. Just don't be fooled by the fact that it's business as usual. I talk to people all the time that will say, "Oh, my advisor says it's just business as usual, and this is normal, and this." And I would say to that, use your eyes, because it's anything but business as usual.
Yeah, that's a sleep at the wheel statement out of the century. Bill, you mentioned, the observations of what's, how the East is a step ahead, if you will, on certain aspects of this. This is sort of in the space of what we're discussing, but most people that follow our work, know that I reside presently in Thailand. Obviously, I'm in the Asian continent, and this has been going on here forever. There are gold shops, like, as many as we have 7-Elevens on the streets of America. They have gold shops. They also have a lot of 7-Elevens here, which is bizarre. They even wear 7-Eleven T-shirts. I don't get it. I don't understand it. But anyway, back to the point. The gold shops are all very easily identifiable, and they're in malls. They're on street corners. They're everywhere, and they're all fiend same color. They're all red. Think of a jewelry store. When you walk past a jewelry store and you see all the diamonds and watches and things displayed, well, the gold is displayed against the red, and you want to look for the government number that validates that if you go in there, you're getting real stuff, properly weighed and priced out, and so forth, and like that. But my point is, here in age, to your point, Bill, but coming down more to the retail side of things here, there are stores. I've bought gold there. I know, but you walk in and you buy jewelry. There's tons of jewelry for men and women of all kinds. 99, well, here it's 90%, a little more than 90%. It's not 99.9%, but a little more than 90%. It's priced a little differently because of the Thai baht and all that, but not gold is gold. It's going up. And so, but not only do you buy jewelry in gold there, and the Asians love it, more so than diamonds, from my experience, because of the value of gold and the unknown value of diamonds, uh, and the legitimacy of the diamond. But back to the gold, you can also buy your bars here, which I've done. So you have, you actually, they don't necessarily display them too much because of the value of it, but they go behind the wall and they come out, and you can buy a lot of bars of gold here, and it's a wonderful thing to make it so readily available to the public. Of course, in America, we buy our gold and silver through wholesalers and dealers like yourself. But I want to move into paper for a moment because that's sort of the subject Bill and Will are on right now, folks, talking about from a global perspective, institutions and governments. And thank goodness that game is coming to an end. Restoring God's money, gold and silver. There's a theme throughout every one of our broadcasts. You'll never see a broadcast at JMC Broadcasting where we don't invoke the Creator, because that's what this is all about, folks, coming back to that truth. So, but I want to ask you, Bill, take this concept of paper to tangible, and let's come down the ladder a bit to the investor. People buy gold and silver. Well, if governments and institutions at that level are making the change from paper to tangible, which Bill and Will have clearly stated here, why aren't the investors doing it? All right, they're still buying ETFs, they're still buying mutual funds, they're still buying mining shares, and I'm sure Peter Schiff is very happy about that. And I'm not going to say that their account statements on paper aren't doing well. They better be. If they're not, get a new broker. But I'm going to share a story after I get your valuable commentary, Bill. What are your question? What are the what red flags would you like to raise for the retail investor who's still doing paper in metals at this time in history?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I would say is that you're right. Obviously, if you've been in paper, gold, and silver, you've done well. Now, not as well as you've done in the physical metals, and there's numbers we talk about with that. But just to keep it brief in that section, is you've done well. You've nothing to complain about on that sense. The problem is when we talk about what is going to come next. If you're in the paper here, you aren't as resilient because you don't actually own that physical gold and silver. They are requisite to things like margin calls. They don't actually have the physical gold and silver on hand. So if that jumps sharply and people want redemptions, I mean, there's also people have no idea often when I talk to them that either there are no redemptions available on a lot of these gold, silver ETFs, or if there are
Mhm.
redemptions, they are extremely limited. Maybe once a year, limited to one per person, limited to availability, limited to having to withdraw a thousand one 1,000 ounce bar per. I mean, all sorts of things and limiters that are in there, and oftentimes people have no idea. And the next question might be, well, Bill, why is that a problem? Why does that actually affect me and my account value? And the answer is, again, you have to remember we're moving away from this fiat system. So when that changes here, the thing that is valuable is not going to be necessarily a share of an ETF that has theoretically gold and silver on hand. It is going to be the actual physical asset. And why would you ever pay more in many cases? Because you have to pay obviously the broker, you have to pay the ETF for the fund manager. I mean, multiple parties involved here year over year over year. Why would you pay more to not own the thing? It's like renting versus buying. Why would you rent if it costed you more than your mortgage? It would be completely backwards. And yet, the answer on why people do this is a little bit more insidious. It's because it's profitable. It's profitable for the financial institutions to prop up this idea for them to keep you in this system and away from the tangible asset where they can't farm you effectively. I mean, to put it lightly, they can't farm that. So that is their end game here. That's the goal. And if you're falling for that, it's either due to a lack of information, which I think is the most common, or maybe it could just be you're a little bit busy. But I would say this is certainly something that you need to take the step on. If you have paper, whatnot assets, being able to move that into physical gold and silver is such a relief for most people because that the antics here of a financial system that we obviously do not trust inherently cannot affect you. It's your property, you own that. So that would be my advice to anyone that's in paper is in what world would you ever pay more for rent than you would for your mortgage?
Great points. I keep it simple, Sam, for myself. If you want gold and silver, buy gold and silver. Very simple. Like Will was talking about before, to make an analogy, you want to get money from Will to Bill. Why go through all the intermediaries? Everyone dipping their hands in a cookie jar. Let Will and Bill exchange their money. Done. Thank you, sir. And I want to just share something. I'll be very brief. And I'd like Will to comment on this subject that Bill just spoke about, the paper to tangible aspect, with the ETFs and the mutual funds and the mining shares. But Many years ago, I used to be, I'm a recovering financial advisor. I used to be a financial advisor. I had 6 independent offices in 3 states. I did that for over a dozen years. And if anyone wants to learn about that, you can go to my website, look at the bio, the history. But the bottom line I'm getting at here is the transition when I left being a financial advisor uh, to where the role I'm playing today, let's say, there were stages and phases of that transition. It was a higher calling. And one of the phases, which was an easy transition, I did consulting. I had a membership organization called the Asset Preservation Institute out of Florida back then. Worked with an economist at the time. But what I'm getting at is this is back in, let's say, '09, that period of time when Hank Paulson came out with his legal pad and said to George Bush, I need $1.7 trillion tomorrow morning or the whole world collapsed. Remember that moment, folks? Uh, and a great movie is The Big Short. Everyone should go see that movie. But at that time, people came into my office, consulting company and so forth, had private consults, we didn't have Zoom then. I don't know. We used Skype. And anyway, people were coming to me, and I like to learn from history. People were coming to me and saying, hey, here's my portfolio. Now, I didn't sell investments or give advice, but I was able to provide analysis and commentary, and boy, did I. And so they said, why is my ETF down? Why is my GLD down? Gold hit its highest point at that time at $50, 2000, and silver hit its highest point at 50. And that's the tangible. And that's the subject you're on, folks. But yet they're coming to my office going, some of my funds, some people were down 10%, some are down 70%. How can this happen? Well, we stripped it down, and Bill Armour just discussed some of that. Will, what's your commentary about the paper proxy from the retail investor standpoint, particularly at this time in history where you gentlemen are raising the awareness level ad infinitum? What would you have to say, Will?
Well, the problem is paper's oversold. We had, as of a couple of weeks ago, somewhere in the ratios of about 356 paper ounces to an actual physical ounce. So now anything over 1-to-1 is technically fraud in my book. Okay. I don't see it any other way than that. That's why I think physical is the only way to go. But when you have that level of fraud, can you imagine that? Taking the same coin and selling it 356 times to other people and they think they're hold something?
Yeah.
What happens when there's a call? What happens when somebody stands for delivery? And that's going to be a problem. So what we saw silver make this big escalation throughout the month of January. And then we saw massive manipulation come in. And the big institutions, bullion banks, et cetera, they've been playing every tool in their toolbox for the last few weeks to manipulate this market back down, some of it so they could get out of short positions. And they're running out of tools. And the biggest issue is going to come when, what happens if all 356 people stand up and say, I want that ounce of silver? What are you going to do when that day comes? And I'm telling you, March is bringing a reckoning. It's coming. You can't look at it any other way. So I think as we look at this, and this is about a system that's been allowed to abuse. Okay. It's been allowed to do all kinds of abusive things.
Sure.
And I think part of this is some of the drama that we need to see, because we need to make sure this never happens again. And I don't think it's going to when we get done with what's coming. I affectionately call it March Madness, but it's just a day of reckoning is coming. It doesn't mean that this is going to $300 on the first day of March. Okay, I'm not crazy. But it's going to move in an upward direction because physical is going to carry the day. People are going to want it. They're going to want to hold it in their hands, and they're not going to trust somebody to say, oh, yeah, it's in my vault for you. They're going to want it delivered, and they want it in their own vault. So that's just my comment on that.
Well, thank you. We're going to ask you a quick question, Will, and then we're going to go to Bill with the question. Absolutely.
It's funny, you were just saying that, and I was thinking it's almost like if 385 roughly people went and bought a car, and the company said, you know what, don't even worry about parking your car, and we're gonna park it for you, and we'll pull it out anytime you need to use it. It's kind of a great deal. I don't have to worry about street parking. That's rough. And so and it works for a little bit. And then all of a sudden here, you two people walk up and they say, I'm going to go pull my Chevy out and I'm going to drive that. And they say, that's so funny. I have the same car. And then all of a sudden you see where the problem
Yeah.
arises. And that is the position we're at right now, is we're just waiting for two people to want their car at the same time, or in this case, two people to want their silver at the same time. And then all of a sudden the system collapses. So for those people who, to tie a bow on this, maybe for those people who have metals in a paper format, you want to be the first one out, not the last one out in this case here. And that's how it feels to me, is you just would rather be a little early than a little late, because you don't want to find out what it looks like trying to pull your car out or your silver out at the exact same time as the guy next to you.
Yeah, no kidding. So, well, since we're talking, Bill, we'll start with you and then we'll go over to Will. Just kind of a quick question, quick answer, but support that answer, if you will. Everybody wants to know, revisit with this. I do. Every time I do the show, because things are fluid, because things are dynamic, and because things are such gargantuan proportions that are, taking place. What do you expect the price in your crystal ball for both gold and silver? Let's now, beware the Ides of March. So now let's get past March. Now it's early spring. We're in April and May. What do you see as the price points for silver and gold early, mid, late spring, and by the end of the year, and why? And we'll have
Yeah.
to ask the same question of Will in a moment. Go ahead.
Yeah, and absolutely. Obviously, no one has a crystal ball, but I would tend to look at basically a retracing back to those numbers we saw in earlier mid-January there, around that 110, 120 range. Probably by end of March, somewhere in there, and then continuing that pace here into the end of the year at the 180, 200 range. On that same trajectory there, gold at the 53, 5400 range over into the next month or so, and then continuing that same trajectory into 7,000. Now, this is all, I take these numbers here. This is off of the assumption we don't see, and I think we actually very may will see actually a financial restructuring here in the very, very near future. But assuming that is not the case, then these numbers are, I'm just tracing out kind of a pattern here that we're seeing. And I would say again that silver end of the year, 180, 200, gold 7,000 or so would be probably appropriate. Now if we talk about gold being revalued at 20,000, obviously that's a big difference from 7,000. We talk about silver being finally really breaking its or the paper grip that exists on it, and that rocketing up, we could see that much higher. But I always end on the side of Bill, you said this and it could have been higher. So I like when people are mad at me because they didn't buy enough, not the other side of that. So so I would say
There
those
you go.
numbers, and I'll let Will, because I have a feeling Will is going to be is not going to hold back as much as I did.
Well, we're
It's a
going to
good
unleash Will.
question.
Just one second.
Okay,
One
sure.
second,
Go
Will.
ahead, John.
But also, please comment on the 20,000, the likelihood of the $20,000 set revaluation. What's your opinion about that? And we've been hearing about a floor being set for metals, particularly silver. So go wherever you want to go, Will, please. But please pick up those two issues for me.
Yeah, we should look at those. First of all, I think Bill's pretty spot on, actually. I agree with him on where things would go if we don't change trajectory in terms of a financial system. However, there's some things that are brewing in the background. And when we look at 20,000 an ounce gold, why is this important? It's important not just for our country, but for a lot of countries. Because if we're going to move back to an asset-backed currency, not every country's sitting on vast tonnage, okay? And they need that price to be adequate so that they have a proper backing for their currency. So it's really a pragmatical thing when you look at it and you say, well, if gold goes to 20,000, we now have adequate reserves to back a full printing for our country. And this is going to be helpful in many different countries, it's not just here. So I do expect it to move up. There's some that predict we could see 9,000 by the end of the year. We'll see how that plays out. But the reality is once silver breaks loose, silver's going to be the leader. Silver's going to set the trajectory, but it isn't silver that's going to end this. It's actually gold that ends the Fed. It's not the silver, but the silver is going to lead the trajectory because it's going to awaken. Silver's the people's money. So this is going to be their first big exposure to these changes that are coming. And as the silver price goes up, it isn't that silver is that an ounce of silver is still an ounce of silver. Let's not, pretend it's anything other than that. However, when that price goes up, let's say it hits $200, $300 an ounce for silver, that means your Federal Reserve note just evaporated by that much. Okay, it's currently we're looking at somewhere around $100. Okay, we're at 76 or 77 right now. Comex price, but you can't buy it for that. Okay, let's be honest. So if we look at what can you buy it for, you're looking at more like the high 80s and early 90s on that. Okay, it's getting some physical silver. If you want a coin, you want a round, you're gonna find that. But the reality is you're going to be faced with a situation, and the situation is this: that when silver escalates and it moves in that direction, where you are now facing the reality that your fiat is imploding in front of you, not due to inflation, but due to the bubble being popped on its perceived value. We saw this happen. Look, we've already seen this happen with Bitcoin. Why is Bitcoin at 66 when 6 months ago it was 118,000? What is the perceived value? You see how fluid that is? The idea of fiat is going to be displayed in front of everyone. And the idea is that there's nothing backing it. It's air. It's hopium. Okay? This is why we're looking at getting back to assets. And assets are a big thing. That's why this president over a year ago put together an executive order that said we need a sovereign wealth fund to hold the assets of the country. So what sits in that sovereign wealth fund? What are the assets? Look at all the federal lands. Look at the national parks. One of those is the Grand Canyon. There's a whole lot in the ground there, folks. It doesn't mean we're going to mine it, but the fact that it's there says that there's value. So this brings assets under a basket that can then be monetized so that we have an opportunity to do great things in the future. And the cool thing about the monetization of these assets, and this includes everything like mining leases and oil leases and all this stuff, it's income. If you have assets that are gaining value because of these activities, like mining and oil drilling and other things, you have a currency that's gaining value, not deflating, losing value. So we're going to go through March Madness and in April. This is about showing the people the fallacy of what this fiat garbage has been, so that we can get to a solid foundation underneath us. And I think this is important. We need silver to be higher just for an economic viability to get it out of the ground. Gold is high enough that it's already viable. But if it's higher, we have a better backing behind our currency when it launches. And there's people that are saying we would like to see that higher value so that we have something a little more concrete behind how much money we can issue according to the assets we hold. So those are just some things to think about as we go forward. If nothing changes in the trajectory, I think Bill's spot on. I think you're looking at 200, maybe 250 on silver, probably 7,000, maybe 8,000 perhaps on the high end by the end of the year for gold. That's just based on the information. If you look at fundamentals and you look at inventory levels, it's got to move. It's going to move. The paper is going to be evaporated. And this blow up of the fake paper with the metals market is just the beginning, because there's other fake stuff in the system that also will need to be cleaned up. And so we'll see that going forward. I think the next 90 days are going to be some of the most consequential. Hope that helps.
Wow. Yeah, it helps quite a bit. And Bill Armour was right. Unleashing Will Barney would take it up a notch in terms of forecasts. You called that, Bill. I want to wrap up our show with a few things. I took some notes while you gentlemen were speaking. To my producer, if you can, resurface the image of our commander-in-chief our president, Donald J. Trump, and put us on a 3 panel, if you're able to do that. And because I just want to focus our audience attention on what President Donald J. Trump's one of his key roles that he is actively doing right now is he's presiding over the dissolution of the 1871 bankrupt corp. That's one big statement. Second, he's presiding over the the demolition. And if we can find that image of the president and put it up there now, I would love that. But if we can't, that's okay. Everybody knows what the man looks like. But is the other thing he's presiding over is the death of the dollar. What dollar? Which dollar? The Federal Reserve note. You know that those 3 words on your green thing. Federal Reserve. Let's private bank. 3 panel. Put our speakers on and the president if you can. If not, just return to the 3 of us. So the Federal Reserve note, it says on the bill, Federal Reserve, private for-profit banking cartel, note, debt too. Okay, so the president is presiding over that, the death of that dollar, and will be reissuing constitutional money, has been very well laid out by these gentlemen week over week or every other week when they're on this broadcast. That is what is happening from a 40,000-foot view, folks, at least on the monetary side. And one other comment I'd like to make before we get your final statements to wrap up the show is we talked a bit about the paper to tangible on at many levels. Folks, if you would like to exit the paper marketplace before it exits you, uh, contact Bill Armour. You can speak with Bill. What's your direct phone number, Bill, for a free consultation? I want our audience to know, I have that email address I put out to the public. I can't answer all of them, but that's John at jmcbroadcasting.com. And the feedback I get through that and from the few wealth coach appointments I do, which can be found at wealthcoachuniversity.com if someone wants to schedule that. But the feedback, Bill, that I'm getting from the public that has talked with you is the best bar none, and that is why you and I have our relationship here, for the value you bring, folks. Action is what I'm all about, and you've just learned some incredible, well-spoken, well laid out, very high level, but in a way we can assimilate what is going on and how big it is. And you don't want to be on the wrong side of this time in history. So what I'm saying is, those that are still sitting in the paper proxies, or you have any questions about gold and silver, this gentleman on the screen is who I recommend to speak to. You see his phone number, 310-407-0239. Action changes things. Wrong action or inaction could be the regret of a lifetime right now. Bill, any quick comments about folks that you would welcome to speak with you? How does that process work, and any of your closing comments?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say the number on that screen, that's not, a call center or something like that. That is my personal number that comes directly to me. So obviously, if I miss you, I might be on another call, but I will call every single person right back. Again, you're getting direct time with myself here to go over it and explain. I mean, anything I've said or we've talked about on the broadcast, I'm happy to go into greater detail on. But I would just implore people to, as and you just said it great, not sit on the sidelines there. If you're watching this and you're hearing this, I just think about it. It's kind of like you've now been warned, you've now been told, you've received the information, and you can lead a horse to water, but you obviously can't make him drink. So I would say the next step here is always to get that next bit of information. And people always tell me one thing they're always surprised about is they say, Bill, I've talked to financial advisors, I've talked to other metals companies, this and that. You were the first person, oftentimes they'll say, you're the first person that didn't jam me up and say, we got to get this done right now. Let's get, this, that, and the other thing is I am there to help people with this transition. And I understand for a lot of people, this is going to be something they've not done before. This is going to be something that they're going to want to think about. They're going to want to mull over. They're going to want a lot of questions answered. Some of them might seem stupid, but they're good questions, and they're questions you have to have confidence in before you can move forward. And so the first step of any of this is to get your questions answered, give you the information so that you can make the informed decision that is going to be best for you, for your families, for your loved ones, children, grandchildren, etc. So the advice I would give anyone is pick up the phone, at least have that conversation. The worst thing that can happen is you walk away saying, oh, I know a little bit more than I did before. And so that would just be what I would tell people is reach out, get that process started, because we're at such a prime time where even I was starting to think we might have missed a huge opportunity for people as it climbed up to 110, $120. Sitting back down at that $75 range gives such a great entry point for so many people that thought they might have missed at least a huge chunk of the ride up. So reach out. You've got a great time here, great entry point for many analysts are saying. So we can go over that and go over the options again if this is something like IRA, 401k, whatever that might be, savings, brokerage, a million different options there. And we can tailor a solution here that will benefit you, benefit your family. Reach out and give me a call at that 310-407-0239 number.
Thank you, Bill Armour. Thank you very much. And I want to also, I forgot to fail to mention this when both Bill and Will were commenting on the price points. You know, our good friend Juan O'Savin, those following me know Juan. And for those that don't, again, visit jmcbroadcasting.com, click on contributor. He's the first face you'll see there, and his biography, which is not fully revealed for obvious reasons once one learns the roles and that Juan has been playing and serving this nation since Ronald Reagan. But anyway, what I'm saying is Juan, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I recall on this very broadcast a couple of weeks back with both Bill, Will, and Juan, he had silver at about $225 an ounce come the end of this year as well. So there's a whole lot of valuable resources, Bill, Will, Juan, and many, many others that go perhaps beyond my show that are all in the same space. And so thank you, Bill Armour. Will, I'd like to say this. You're rapidly becoming a very sought after voice. You on all that's going on in this world, not just in the economic arena, but you have a lot of expertise there. I'm seeing you on a lot of different platforms. Where can people follow you? Besides, obviously, your great work at enochgs.com. Share with our audience a bit so people can stay in touch with you. They don't have to wait every 2 weeks for you to be here.
Sure. Yes, you can go to enochgs.com. I do accept some limited consulting appointments if you want to talk about your projects, how you want to get your projects to market and make it happen. There is a calendar link. I think it's towards the bottom of the first page. You'll just have to see if there's a time slot there. I only have so much time, so I can allocate that much, and so you can take a look there. For a limited time, we're actually offering those services, and we're doing this because a lot of people are struggling, and we're trying to just help. But we're offering that instead of the normal price that you would typically pay to get me. You can simply make a donation, and we will honor that as well. So donate what you can afford. That is a limited time thing. I'm not going to be able to keep doing that. And once as we get into larger funding schedule, my time is going to be very limited. So I don't know how long I'll be able to do this. There's an opportunity now if you want to speak with me. So, but this is a great discussion that we've had here. Thank you so much, Bill, by the way, and the work that you're doing to help people get into actual physical product, because there's so many people trying to find some level of safety. Within the last month, you have had major wealth managers around the world begin to change all of their previous, shall we say, counsel to their wealth clients. In the past, typically, most people would be counseled to hold 5 to 7% in metals as just a hedge, right? But within the last month, we've seen major groups like Merrill Lynch come out and say, you need to be 30%. Why would they be saying this if they didn't know there's something moving right here, right? To move from 5 to 10 to 30 is not a small move. And it's a very important movement. As we look at what's going on with China, you can expect China to be one of the first to clamp down on the whole paper madness. They're already clamping down on spoofing. Spoofing is where you put in a large sell order to drive the market down, only at the end of the day to cancel the order. Okay. And they are actually deleting people and revoking their ability to even trade on the market if they find them doing this. So China's actually leading the way here to stop the nonsense. I expect that to continue as we get into March, but I expect the U.S. is going to have to answer with something similar to stop some of the madness that's going on, because all of these are manipulation tools, and they're designed to try to manipulate the markets one way or the other. All we really want, I think all anybody listening to this podcast wants, is they just want fair, transparent markets. They want it to be real. They don't want it to be fake or manufactured, and that's what this paper nonsense has done. So, if you've got an opportunity, if you're trying to position yourself and you're trying to get into that place of safety, there is nothing better than gold and silver as a hedge of safety. For thousands of years, it has been such and probably will continue to be so. So, a fantastic place to hold and secure yourself if you want to do that. Again, and I hope it's okay if I say this, John, but I think all of the comments here is we are not your financial advisors, and this isn't financial advice.
Correct.
We're talking from our own experience about what we see in the market and what we see going on. Everyone needs to make their own choices and decisions by the information that you can find. But we hope that we've shared a little bit of the light of what is happening, some of the machinations in the market, to give you just a little bit of an overview of things that are currently taking place, because the transition will be a little bumpy. There's no way it cannot be a little bumpy. But I do think you're going to, as we move through this, I expect there to be a bit of a back and forth with the U.S. and China on how metals are handled and managed. And it's going to reflect in the fiat looking less and less like a place of safety ultimately. And that is going to lead us into an asset-backed currency, which is going to be really a phenomenal future. I hope that helps.
It does help. Thank you, Will. And you're right, because I didn't spend any commentary in between your guys, gentlemen's narratives about the danger and how bumpy this final stages are going to be. And they are going to be very bumpy. And Juan has talked about that too, the near-death experience for the U.S. dollar or the Federal Reserve's note. So that's why you want to prepare. And to your point, we don't give specific investment advice. We're speaking to cameras here, to a large audience across the world. But having said that, 3 calls to action before we sign off our panel. You know how to reach Will Barney. Very limited. I didn't realize you had some consult available. I'm happy you do. And I know why it's going to be limited time. I understand that. I'm in the same situation. I have wealthcoachuniversity.com. There's a mechanism to schedule a free consult with me and go through that process. And also on the subject of donations and such, for many, many years with American Media Periscope that I had founded and worked within, we donated systematically, automatically every month, and I would adjust that number up as we started to prosper in that entity. We donated to Operation Underground Railroad, which rescues young girls and boys, mainly girls, from a life of sex trafficking, thanks to Tim Ballard's work. I had the opportunity to meet Jim Caviezel, thanks to Juan. He put an event together with about 200 people of interest, like podcasters and people in all kinds of organizations and military and so forth. And we got to see the screening of Sound of Freedom long before Angel Studios put it out there. Thank goodness for them. And when the film ended, and you got people like, I was there, David Rodriguez, Michael Jaco, rest in peace, retired Lieutenant Colonel, retired Scott Bennett, and so many people that and a lot of people I got to meet that Juan knew. Anyway, when we saw Sound of Freedom, you had a lot of tough guys in that room, and we were holding back tears. It was an intense movie. And thank you, Jim Caviezel. But the interesting thing is when the movie ended, he rented a private theater in Vegas. Who came out on the stage to talk with us about it was Jim Caviezel. And so it was very interesting point, but I got to come full circle. Right. That's what prompted me at that time to shift my donations every month to Operation Underground Railroad. And today I just want to make an announcement to our audience, and I probably should do this on the Global Defense War panel, but I'm researching right now through my military contacts, veterans organizations that passed the test. And we're going to begin at JMC Broadcasting what I can, but it'll be the same thing every month. A donation will be going to help our veterans. And but anyway, action changes things. You can reach Will Barney, you can reach me, and very importantly, you can reach Bill Armour. And I want to thank both Will and Bill. I throw a few jokes here in the show here and there to lighten things up because I tend to be a bit serious, but these are serious subjects, and you gentlemen take the angst out of it. Why? Because knowledge is power, but applied knowledge is wisdom. So take the steps, folks. Thank you, Will Barney and Bill Armour. I'll be right back after this important announcement about Michael Jaco.
Don't miss this month's live Patriot Q&A Hour as John Michael Chambers hosts our Patriot Power guest, retired Navy SEAL Special Ops CIA Michael Jaco. Get your questions answered. Mark your calendars. February 26, 2026, 8 p.m. Eastern Time sharp. Visit jmcbroadcasting.com and click on the Premium Portal Sign-Up tab. Enter your password and you're in. Not a JMC Broadcasting Premium member yet? You could be. Simply click on the Premium Portal Sign-Up tab. Enter your info, and that's it. John and Jaco. Looking forward to answering your questions for the solid hour. See you there. Where we go one, we go all.
All right, as we wrap up in the next, minute or two, come join us February 26th. As you just saw, pardon me, you visit jmcbroadcasting.com, click on Premium Portal. A drop down will come. There'll be an introductory video that we produced and a listing of all the benefits you get in Premium Portal. And the banner thing in the Premium Portal, of course, is the monthly Patriot Q&A. It's just $9.99 a month for all the benefits in Premium. Consider joining us. Those that choose not to, fine, that's wonderful. All of our broadcasting is free. All the content we put out is free, and we put out a lot of content at JMC Broadcasting. So keep that in mind and join us in our free subscription if you're not inclined to join us in Premium. But those that are, we look forward to seeing you, Jaco and John, that's me, discussing what's on your mind, answering your questions for a solid hour. Mark your calendars. It's coming up very soon. We look forward to seeing you there. Joining us next week on the GFR, we are live every week on 4 or 5 platforms, as you know, including our 2 websites, is a returning guest, Brandon Clark, who I'm newly introducing. And Brandon's been getting a lot of phone calls just from his premiere appearance here because he has a very niche value. When you go through this whole podcaster world movement and so forth and so on, you never find, and if you do, send it to me. I've never seen it. Anyone discussing the area that he brings value in, and that's a retirement planning specialist. You're going to learn all about annuities, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and getting guaranteed income you can never outlive. We're going to be exploring this every other week in detail from many aspects with Brandon Clark. And boy, do we love Rob Cunningham, and I can't wait for him to come back and join us. He not only is he a breath of fresh air, he's a breath of incredible knowledge and takes things into different spaces that, let's say, Bill and Will and I don't go into. So we welcome Rob Cunningham back and Brandon Clark next week on the Global Financial Reset. This is John Michael Chambers speaking with his voice. Please speak with your voice and move to action. This is an incredible time. Beware the Ides of March. Stay safe, everyone, and God bless you.
The Global Financial Reset is happening right now. The opportunities through this transition remain for some time to come. Don't miss this unprecedented moment in history. But caution, identify the dangers through this transition and prevent fatal mistakes by being ill-advised or uninformed. Schedule your private wealth coach consult with John Michael Chambers on a Zoom screen meeting. The ability to meet with JMC is very limited. Learn more by visiting wealthcoachuniversity.com. Once prepared, schedule your consult with JMC. It's time to seize the opportunities and to goots. Yes, goots. Get out of the system. QFS, stablecoin, the US dollar, gold and silver, Fed, IRS changes, income needs, your personal situation will be addressed. It's time.
This is a wealth coach consulting appointment for those with questions and/or assets to protect. John is not a financial advisor and does not give specific investment advice, nor does he sell any investments, insurance, or precious metals.
Gain private access to John and his resource network. Schedule your consult today. WealthCoachUniversity.com.